time. Hold on, I'll give it the old. There we go. All right, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
No, you give the guy the
We're gonna be tonight. All right. Let's see. We will start with a motion to approve the June 26th agenda.
Motion to approve the June 26th agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Great. Motion to approve the minutes from June 5th.
Move to approve the minutes from June 5th.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Next up on the agenda, we've got school committee chairperson comments. I don't have anything specific tonight, just to say if there's any students or teachers watching tonight, congratulations on wrapping up the year. And I still can't believe we're actually in the last school committee meeting of the year. This year has certainly flown by. So thank you to everybody who showed up throughout the year, all our presenters and students, et cetera. It was a good year, and I look forward to chairing the next year officially. So with that, we can move to community comments. We definitely don't have to look around the room to see if we have anybody tonight. Sam, anybody online raising hands?
I see no hands raised.
All right, sounds good. Next, we can move over to Dr. Cohen for superintendent and administrator comments.
All right, thank you. I'm going to begin with an introduction of our new middle school principal, Ms. Robin Benoit. Come on up. As I do, I'm going to embarrass her. Maybe although she's already read it, so I don't know. But I'm going to read through so the whole community hears it. You probably have read it, so you can know the background for Robin here. But I'm thrilled to announce her appointment. She'll be beginning on July 1st, but already starting her transition. She was selected from a wide pool of qualified candidates, and it's a testament to her exceptional qualifications and 28 years of dedication to education as a teacher and a leader. Her educational leadership doctoral dissertation defense is scheduled for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I kept thinking Thursday. The 28th, wait, that's tomorrow, all
What's the
right.
subject?
It is on superintendent experiences during the convergent crises of 2020 and 2021. It's a
Wow.
narrative study.
So we'll soon be conferring her with the well-deserved title of doctor. So good luck with that. She brings 20 years of invaluable experience as a STEM middle school teacher in esteemed institutions such as Ashland, Francis W. Parker Charter School, Neshoba Regional, and Concord. Through her teaching career, she held various roles, including mentor, coach, advisor, PD, committee member, strategic planning member, school council, etc. There are lots of others I didn't list in there, but it demonstrates her commitment to both student and teacher development. She served as a K-12 STEM coordinator in Neshoba, where she made significant contributions to the coordination of middle school standards-based reporting systems, and also the development of a middle school advisory program. And subsequently, she spent 6 years as the associate principal of the Bromfield School in Hartford's public schools. In her most recent role as the director of instructional design in her district, Ms. Benoit spearheaded the review of math, social studies, and literary practices. Additionally, she provided vital support to teachers in implementing instructional strategies for English learners. She designed PD for UDL, which is something that we're working on here, and played an instrumental role in implementing co-teaching teams. And as you know, that's a big focus in our district here as well. Her colleagues and teachers hold her in high esteem, describing her as someone who forges deep relationships, and that was the term that was used in a reference check that I had. You don't know that, but that's what someone said. She develops really deep relationships with people, and people keep coming back from her different experiences for advice. She possesses a reflective nature that came through in her interview, and she is definitely a life learner at the core. They commended her as being a true teacher at heart, whose decision-making is always guided by what is in the best interest of students. Numerous people stated that in the reference checks. Her ability to see the bigger picture and to listen to others has earned her the respect and admiration of her colleagues, and is the foundation of strong relationships with all stakeholders. During the selection process, the Miscall Hill stakeholders were impressed by her thoughtful responses. These are the quotes, I didn't put them in quotes here, but what they said: thoughtful responses, genuine love for middle school students. They loved her extensive teaching background and her collaborative approach. They felt that she would definitely listen to them and work together with them. And she emerged right as the ideal candidate. So please join us in welcoming Ms. soon-to-be Dr. Robin Benoit as our next principal. And we're confident in her leadership, passion for education, and unwavering commitment to students will benefit us all. I know that's a lot, but I really wanted to do justice for the process that you just went through the last couple of years.
Yeah, congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and really just thrilled to get to know everybody and start to work.
So, anybody have any questions for her?
Oh, just a.
It's not an interview though, because she's, she went through that process.
We're really looking forward to having a new set of eyes on Ms. Hill and having that whole thing. We've always wanted to see progressive improvement. It has been improving in the last few years, but we need some steps and bounds to be made there. So really looking forward to it.
I'm excited to begin.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So my second, you're going to kind of see bookends of strategic planning. We're going to begin right now. I'm going to give the end of year presentation on our goals and action steps from this year. And then later on, after we go through the business items, I'll be sharing the final draft, or almost close to final draft, of our next strategic plan for the 5 years. In the background documents I shared with you, our tracking progress document. And if you recall, I started with that at the beginning of the year of what all the action steps were going to be with timelines. I gave a mid-year update, and then this is the end-of-year update. And also through my own superintendent goals, which some pull from that, I gave you specific actions that I had taken related to it. What I try to do tonight, and got it? Awesome. Thank you. If you go to the next page. Thank you. Always like to have the image, and actually when we dive into the new plan, you're going to see slightly different language and more elements to our next strategic plan. But we always have alignments, and that's what we're going to be talking about, are the goals and action steps today. Right? So our first strategic goal was, if you remember, we talked about understand, support, and engage. And the first category that I'm going to reference is going to be related to engagement, reviewing, evaluating, implementing formal processes to access and utilize student data in order to understand the unique strengths, challenges, needs, and interests of our learners. So if you go to the next slide, what I did here, in the last one, mid-year, I told you our progress. So I said somewhere in green, somewhere in yellow, somewhere in red. What I'm doing here, I'm actually just going to highlight these areas, a couple in each of the categories. You have the whole green, it's mostly all green and yellow in the tracking document. I didn't want to go through each of those, but what I wanted to do is try to give you some outcomes or highlights that maybe we hadn't talked about or given you throughout the year. You may have heard, hopefully you've heard from some of them, but that was my goal tonight. So the first one we're going to talk about is evaluating school systems for data. If you go to the next one. I don't know if you recall earlier this year, but this is under the leadership of Cheryl. She worked with our leadership team in the development and subgroups for the development of our data inquiry cycle. And the introduction of data inquiry cycles is the first time it was introduced in our district this year, using that terminology. Of course, we always looked at student data, but we're trying to streamline it so we have a system and have protocols that go with each of these sections that can be used in all of the buildings. So this year there was a lot of piloting and also developing this process, and this is one of the outcomes that we see that we can use moving forward into the next year. The next one is continuing, excuse me, relating to the ongoing use of data. So I just want to highlight a couple areas. There's many more I could have, but didn't want to cover all of these slides for you, and you have the details in the packet. But if you recall, we were involved in that S3 and we were in year 1, S3, and what they determined in the roadmap for year 2, this is some of the professional development that we're going to be expanding on heading into the next year in our content sessions of deepening the whole child through equity lens. We're going to be analyzing data-informed systems change. We're going to be focusing on students needing intensive support, and we're going to be scaling and sustaining transition planning for student support plans. So if you recall from previous in presentations she's given earlier in the year, some aspects of this were developing kind of the whole child review of data for all of our students. That was one aspect that we're developing. Another is looking at our systems of support. So our student support system, our child study, our processes, and analysis of that. Another aspect of our work has been around what are the resources that we have in our community. So that was one of the workshops that we had where we had to identify our community resources and then identify whether or not it was a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 resource, and then create basically a database for that we can use at each of the schools, but also to support the whole district. And those would be many slides if I showed it to you, but they've done tremendous work this year. And this is through a partnership and academy with DESE, and they've been meeting monthly. They'd have small groups that they would meet at each of the buildings, and then you come together for district work to develop this. So we were only in year 1, but made a lot of progress. The second example, and I don't know if you can remember back to when Ms. Hill came and presented with Cheryl related to some of the data and data protocols they were using, and you definitely heard Jen Mannion talk about it, the fact that we're triangulating our data. So they're all pieces of the data together to give the whole picture of how we're doing or how our students are doing. So they talked about how they had the MCAS data, they had the street data, which comes from a book called Street Data, but that piece is what the teachers observe in the classroom, and they come together and share the more anecdotal or some of from their common assessments that they're using. And then you have the iReady data, and so that iReady goes just K to 8, but how they would triangulate it and then see and try to understand what's going on with students and ways that they can intervene or change some of their instruction, maybe assessments, look at curriculum, etc. And what I noticed, it's more anecdotal, but what I noticed by the end of the year, as a result, particularly at MISCO, oh good, who's up there? So you can hear the MISCO. I don't know. I told her she could leave, but at MISCO in particular, I heard teachers talking about this. It became part of the common language by the end of the year from all of the faculty meetings. I would observe when I would do walkthroughs with Jen Mannion or Nick Cuomo, and I would go, sometimes we'd pop into different grade level meetings or curriculum meetings, and this is what they were doing. I saw it in action. I probably should have taken some pictures so I could show you. Maybe next year I'll do that. But it became, in the beginning, was like, what is this street data? What, And even the first year of iReady, well, how do we analyze it? How do we use it? And we have talked about our progression the last 3 years, and it has finally, after 3 years of some of this work, it's come to fruition in their conversations, in their day-to-day practice. Do we need to keep getting better? Of course, always, and that's some of the work you'll hear later. But I'm just really pleased by the growth that I've seen in their conversations.
Lauren, do we ever do anything is that at the teacher level to pull those 3 data sources together? Or did we ever get to a point where there's a dashboard or I know we have an analytics person, like a big data that's saying, okay, I'm gonna go out harvest this data, and then I'm creating a 1-page dashboard on every student that has elements of all those data pulling into one sheet? Or is it really at the teacher level to log into MCAS, log into iReady, look at grades, classroom interaction, etc.?
That's a great question and segue to some of the work we're doing. We have been piloting a few things. So you have the whole child review, which I know you haven't really seen too much of what that system looks like, but that's looking to bring in and train us on how we bring in the street data, like the teacher commenter, the progress, and it also will bring in the SEL data, and the idea is to bring in some of the academic data. And so they're looking at how could they use it at a teacher level, school level. So that we're kind of creating that and working through what would we want in that. That's an S3. And then I know Cheryl's dying to get up here, but I'm not gonna let her. Not yet. But if I say something wrong, let me know. But she's dying to say that we're working with a company and been piloting different dashboards, as you're saying. So that's been part of the work this year, was to have them come and present. And so next year, we are going to be trying out one called Open Architects, which can bring in all of that data, correct? Correct. All right. And it creates a dashboard.
Oh, wait, what's the other program though?
Panorama?
Panorama?
Yeah,
Does
so it would pull
Panorama-
that in, yeah. Well, all of those systems can, Panorama will have, they'll say, oh, we can bring it all in here. So they had to look, but can you, does it all work? You know, and then you had something with Power School where, well, that's our SIS system, which is our, student information system. Can they do it? Well, we can, but not quite perfectly.
Yeah.
And with I'm gonna let her explain the Open Architect. She led that, and she'll tell you why she likes it the best.
Okay.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Do you want me to come up?
Sure.
So the pilot that we're doing is exactly to your question. This year, it was on the teachers. We're going to this source and this source and this source, and we have lots of different sources, and so it's all really good data. But the feedback that we got in doing this work with S3 and then also doing the data cycles is that pulling it together is essential. And so Open Architects works with any group to create connectors with the data sources. They don't need anything except for the code, basically, to be able to take the data and bring it into their dashboard. They do it by using a unique identifier for every student, and then they customize the graphics. So what we'll do is we'll put together a dashboard to use, first of all, through the S3 program that will look very much like individual students, because that's what they're doing there. With respect to the data inquiry work, there'll be a different dashboard that will actually allow aggregate review so that the teacher teams can look at the tier 1 areas that need focus, not just individual kids.
Cool.
Are you thinking of a specific set of metrics for the child and then the performance overall of the school? So like the key performance metrics that you might focus on?
So with the S3 work, it's very much individualized, okay? So it's very much kind of along protocols that start with what are the students' strengths, what are the students' areas of growth, and what resources, supports, community and school do we have to activate both of those things, right? So that every student, it's still a tier 1 support, every student, but it's more you're starting with individuals. With the data inquiry work, it's a little bit different. It's more about identifying trends, even longitudinal trends, areas where we see that our growth hasn't been as good as we'd like it to be, and then structuring conversations around, well, how can we work as a team to focus on those areas of growth, to get the whole team kind of working on it. So an example this year was, looking at, I'm trying to remember, the 6th grade team was looking at using informational text, okay? And how could we better work as a team to really interrogate the informational text and then to write about it ultimately. And so across the 6th grade team, no matter what the teachers were working on, were teaching, whether they were math or science or English or social studies, they were looking at that. And what we are going to be working on next year is a series of assessments that match up with that focus, right? So formative assessments that we can use to kind of monitor progress along the way. The iReady is great, and we only have it 3 times.
So let me kind of repeat that back to see if I got it. So S3 is going to basically be the student dashboard. And then open architecture allows you start to do class grade level dashboard.
Open Architects is a company that will do both.
Okay.
Okay. It will give us dashboards for both purposes effectively.
It'd be cool to see the blueprint of that over, because there's a lot of terms. I know we're probably as close as anybody doing this every 2 to 3 weeks, but there's S3, open architecture, panorama, like how does, like, what's the single flow chart?
Yep.
As to how those come together? It'd be cool to see it.
Yeah, you could do that as a visual. And I think, if you go back 5 years ago, We didn't have any of them.
Yeah.
And so we finally built our assessment systems, and we're working on the level of teachers understanding and administrators how to use them, right? And now that we're collecting that data from all the different sources, then now how do we bring it together and track it? So it's been building, and I'm hoping the open architects might be, the best one. I know they're easy to work with, which is always helpful when you're trying to develop something. And we'll be trying that out next year and see if it fits our purposes. Because there are lots of different, ways to do it, or lots of companies saying, hey, we can do this for you. But I know we've made some progress this year. So I'm excited about that.
I mean, this is so cool, I have to tell you, because there's a lot of, the middle school is that transitional period for all the kids. And there's a lot of parents who, now I'm going to softball games. So there's a lot of parents that come up to me and say, do you know what's happening in school? You know what I'm saying? So I get a lot of feedback about their impression of what's going on. And usually it's based on, things that have happened over the last 3 years or 5 years. It's not about what's happening in the future.
That's a really good point, because I've had people reference things and it's from
Exactly.
4 years ago.
So I mean, it's going to be.
We moved greatly. And when I said, Jen Mannion has led them, and that team has led them and moved them, with district support over the last 6 years. And we're in a really great spot to continue.
I can't tell you how important it's going to be to communicate that we're bringing together data for each individual child to improve their capabilities in middle school.
Yeah.
And anything, I don't know how that would impact like special education, which is also the types of emotional and support that different kids need in middle school isn't necessarily the same as it was in primary school or in high school. So it's a transitional period. So just getting that message out to people and getting them excited about what we're doing, because data is the basis for all that. So I think it's pretty cool.
It's a good conversation to have too, in conjunction with the budget cycles, because what I keep thinking when we talk about how we're getting better at analyzing data and putting data together. So my next step is thinking, okay, so we're now identifying where students need support. Do we have the necessary supports in place? Do we have the programs? Do we have the staffing? Is our budget going in the right direction in terms of supporting the students? Sort of build it, they'll come sort of philosophy. And I know we just went through sort of, our immediate needs and our projected needs is, and I know we're only in the first year with this S3 program, but in some of the needs that have been identified, I'm assuming that was built into some of those budget
The
requests.
inventories, yeah. I think those inventories will definitely show spaces where we'll have students with needs, and we'll see where we have lots of resources and where we don't have as many.
Right.
But it's so exciting. I mean, it's really cool that this is happening. It's a lot of fun. I'm a sort of data geek, so.
Well, when the question leads right into what we're doing, you're onto something.
Yeah.
But it's good that you asked the question too about special education, Sean, too, which I think the message is this helps us to build a more robust tiered intervention system.
Like the response is,
Right.
we have to improve our response in middle school. We all know it.
Right.
But this is going to give that focused attention on each child, which is really cool.
Which means that they can get the support that they need without having to be identified as a student with a disability, which is fantastic for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And
You also can make the argument, Carrie, that goes up and down both ways, right? Because we don't tier the students in the middle school. And so where are the kids that are born, right? And does these things kind of figure out how you individually challenge somebody?
which they should, absolutely. So tiered interventions are supposed to work
Both ways.
right? So.
Cool.
Yeah, keep going. That's slide 7. Just keep us on pace. Like a whole nother show. That's right. No, it's all good. Great questions, comments. So the next one, we just wanted to show some evidence related to evaluating school systems for data, and also our PD around data and data use and data inquiry, and to see this is staff reporting beginning year to mid-year. Their time that they needed for data-related support. You can see that it's shifted. We've made some impact and had a lot of growth in our teachers' understanding. There's still a ways to go with that, which we know, but just really impressed by the PD. And it was a nice mix of professional development on the PD days, but also this work that I referenced at faculty meetings and in department meetings, and was embedded in what everyone was doing as well, week to week. All right, next one. One of the other categories that I hadn't really talked about too much, although hopefully you saw it in our presentations, but incorporating student voice. You'll see this showing up as well in our next plan. But some ways that student voice, I wanted to highlight, if you didn't get a chance, we had the civic action projects, which have been going on the last couple of years, but every year they get much better. Yes, with the ongoing PD that we have for our teachers, and now students are getting used to it because they're doing it in 8th grade, and then they're coming through at the high school and they've already done it, and now we're starting it at the 5th grade as well. And I could talk all night about the 5th graders that came from Rod McMurray's class. Those are some on the right, and came forward talking about how to make Misco Hill more equitable. And some, you can add, you did some of them, I did some of them, Cheryl, so feel free to add, but one was about, there were a lot of presentations related to lockers and lack of locker space, because we have really narrow ones in two of the grades.
The one on the bottom is ramps.
Ramps, yep.
I think the one on the top was about the
The
playing fields.
Oh, that one was the playing fields?
Yeah.
Okay, we had one on urinals, that some of the urinals are really low to the ground, and they talked about how students are all different heights. And so they had, that was probably one of my favorite presentations. Because I didn't think it would be, but every time I asked a question, one of the students we've done research on that, and just opened up and gave me like full-on research. It was incredible, especially in 5th grade.
You could publish that nationally.
Yeah.
Journal research.
Yeah, but you know, can you think of any of the other ones?
Standardized.
There was-
The final one.
Oh, yeah, Jay and I sat for the fire alarms. This is all Mr. And they said that it was so loud that students who have sensory issues for hearing, were there alternative ways to at least give them a heads up before, even a second or a light before to flash, or is there a way to work on the sound? And they met with Jay, and we said, you're coming to the right people. And immediately we got the fire department in, and he met with them again, and just to give them some more insight on those areas. So there were areas that we could immediately start to make some changes. Some talked about the dress code, and I pointed out that we made those changes, which they were very happy that they were concerned about a sexist dress code, but we had actually made changes, but they wouldn't have known that coming in as 5th graders, that we just made the change this past year. I'm trying to think some of the other ones, but they were excellent. But anyway, so not only do you see it in the classrooms, but you have lots of opportunities that we're creating in advisory councils. You see the list there, the middle school, the high school, elementary schools, and they would have student advisories ask for feedback, and then they come forward, and every time we're really trying to increase their engagement in school decision making. We got feedback from the high school Inspired Learning Day Design Challenge. We immediately took that feedback from students and made significant changes in the one that came out in June. And we're always seeking feedback. There are always ways we can do it, but I'm really proud of the principals and the leadership and the intentional ways that they did that. And you'll see it showing up more and more in a lot of our student work, as well as we have a lot of workplace type of learning and problem-based learning as well. I don't know if you have any questions on that? Okay. So I could talk about that the whole time. Now, the Ed-Eval observation form shows up in a couple places, and I left it at yellow, and the only reason why I left it at yellow is what we did not as fully complete was because we actually just changed what we were doing, so I can't say we actually did what we said we were going to do at the beginning of the year, but I'm really pleased with the work that we did this spring. We had a couple Ed-Eval committees where the administrator representatives met with the MRTA reps, and we reconvened and took our observation form, which was really lengthy. I should have shown you a picture of what it is and what it will be. And it had lots of check marks and boxes and some things that were confusing. We came out with that. That's when we go in and do walkthroughs and observations of our staff members. And that was at the beginning. It's actually when I came on board here 10 years ago, and we had a new ed-eval system, and that's the form we created. What we've learned over the years is there's all these distractors in that form, and we want to get at the heart of the standards and the elements and what we're seeing in the classroom and how to be more narrative and simplified for greater conversations and discussions with our teachers. And so what we have is we have a new form that we agreed to. It only took us a couple meetings to do so, and we'll be launching that next year. And we're also there's a new DESE rubric that people can pilot next year for teacher rubrics. Bring in culturally proficient practices into the rubric, and also condenses the teacher rubric a little bit as well. And we'll start looking at that and shifting to pilot it, and then have conversations about whether or not we're going to keep that whole model rubric going forward. But we made a lot of progress, and I'm proud of the work that we did, and we haven't talked about it yet this year because it was work we did in the spring, so I wanted to highlight that for you. We're going to go to 2, support. Enhance the district's multi-tiered systems of support by providing targeted, PD, enriching, inclusive Tier 1 practices and supports. I'm just going to highlight a couple here because in some cases we have highlighted. Can you go to the next one? I click it here and I keep thinking that you have, and I'm not controlling it. So I'm going to just focus on some of the PD and also show you a sample of our digital citizenship modules that have been organized. So the first one, we have PD and inclusive practices. You can see evidence when you go through classrooms from last year to this year, where you have increased student agency, which is one of the elements that we always want to focus on. And there's definitely been an increase in small group work, which was a huge focus for us this year. And I would say we were still recovering from COVID. So prior to COVID, we had tons of small group instruction, station instruction where students would move around, and a lot of in-person guided reading. And then because of COVID, if you recall, I tried to block it out, but basically we had to space out into basically rows. We're all masked, have to stay 6 feet from each other, right? So you couldn't do the small groups, you couldn't do all those things like best practices. So then last year, when we're kind of coming out of it, still in masks for a while, so you don't have as much of the social interaction that you normally have, and then you have the shifting, but still a fair amount of COVID last year too that we were tracking, and it took some time to get us back into some of these practices, but the focus on the PD has really moved it, and a lot of the feedback that we're giving. At the beginning of last year, we talked about MTSS. I don't know if it was, I'm trying to think if it was last year or this year. I remember one teacher saying, "What is this?" It was new, right? And do you remember that?
It was last year.
Yeah, it was last year. All right, so good. But it was this kind of piece of how do you track how much they've learned or how they're feeling more comfortable with the language. So that was last year when we were starting to introduce even the verbiage of MTSS and what that means and how everything fits together. And now you can see over the course the evidence and growth of understanding of MTSS through our PD, and this is mid-year data. So I think even at the end of the year, if we would have had the end of year data for you would see more growth with the work that we've done. And it always takes about 3 to 5 years for any big change. It takes about 3 years for things to kind of take hold if you're working on it. So just like I referenced some of the assessments, it's taken 3 to 5 years for it to be part of what we just do. At the beginning, it's like, what are we doing? And that's just your initial reaction because it's new. Same thing with MTSS, same thing with any of our other topics. So yeah, had great growth there. The next one is pretty cool. Yep. Were you just on that last one when I was talking?
This one?
Yeah.
No, I was on this one.
Oh,
Oh, no.
sorry.
Was I on the wrong?
Looking at mine, yeah. That's what you guys have it in front of you.
We
Too.
do, yeah.
Okay, great. You can keep going. So digital citizenship, I have to pay attention. So all good. Modules. This is a sample. So we had Dave Quinn put together these modules it was one of our steps in order to, over the course, I took, if you went on the left, if I had enough room, you'd see like K to 2 and 3 to 4 and the grade levels. And basically, we've been piloting. I can't say that all of these have been done this year. We put that together and they're piloting it along with some Thrively SEL lessons, social emotional learning lessons as well. But you had never seen the digital citizenship category, so I wanted to show that to you so you were aware that we're making some progress in that. That's been kind of in our plans for a few years, and I was really pleased to see at least we have an outline. What we found is some, when we tried them, they were great for that grade level, and others they said, nope, this doesn't work, and that's what we're going to keep adjusting as we go through. I'm going to jump to strategic goal number 3, engage. This is some of the fun stuff as well. Design opportunities for students and staff to engage in authentic learning experiences that allow them to understand and practice the portrait of a learner, or POL competencies. So I'm going to highlight how we worked on embedding POL into our practice. I'm going to talk a little bit about the numbers of Project Lead the Way. Hopefully you're pretty familiar with that. We talked about it all year. And we haven't talked yet about portfolio systems this year. Just wanted to let you know what we've been doing in that area. So for the portrait of a learner, next slide. Okay. On the right, you can see some of the reflective practices. That's from elementary. When they had their Inspired Learning Day Design Challenge, we intentionally connected the design challenge across our district, pre-K to 12, to the portrait of a learner competencies, and it looked different at all the grade levels. So you had the superpowers. Everyone was a superpower at the elementary, and they reflected on that, had their little buttons. And at the middle school, they did more deeper reflections, and then at the high school, even more so. It looked different, but they were all doing the same thing. Some of the high school intentional work that they did, they designed a protocol for reflecting at their lead learner workshops. They obtained resources, laminated the sheets, so each classroom had a set that they could use to reflect on how lessons connected to Portrait of a Learner. And they also gained feedback about a student's 4-year plan of experiences related to Portrait of a Learner. And we're trying to have our teachers figure out how to intentionally embed it or make connections in their day-to-day instruction. At the elementary, they had all school meetings reviewing Portrait of a Learner. They also had Portrait of a Learner school read-alouds where they connected back to each of the competencies. And then they had the Superheroes book and sentence starters for students to personally connect. So you'd have students saying, I'm an inspired innovator, or I'm a global citizen, and this is why. Middle school highlights, they had a win lesson, a what I need lesson focused on Portrait of a Learner exploration of the competencies. And they also used some of the superpowers, and they used a freeze frame activity, which basically you pick a competency and you have to act it out quickly as if someone just took a picture of you in action. It's called a freeze frame. And then they also had their inspired learning reflections. There was more, I couldn't fit it on the slide, and you can see it in the tracking document, but we've made a lot of progress there. And again, that's an area that I hear students talk about. Before this year, I didn't hear students talking regularly at all levels about Portrait of a Learner competencies. It was only at the high school. Now this year, if you say it, they know what it is. They didn't know at the beginning of the year, but they do know at the end of the year. And one great example, we had students who were taking there's a freshman course, and they focus on the Portrait of a Learner competencies, and those students later on could tell you all about it after taking that course, which is great. Project Lead the Way. I also didn't have enough room, so it was hard to put the pictures in here, but we've had PD and course expansion. If you recall, about 3 or 4 years ago, we started at the middle school, and the goal was to have it at least one unit in our science classes and across all 4 grades, and also to have our technology classes have the Project Lead the Way offerings. Then our goal was to expand it down to elementary. We received a grant for that. In the end, we need to expand it to all grades. We're starting at 4th and 3rd, which we expanded to this year. You can see the numbers there. And we also, our goal is to expand it up, and using an innovative pathways was one way that we were expanding it up in the computer science pathway using Project Lead the Way courses. So right now in computer science, you see, or related to technology and robotics, you see a fair amount 5 through heading into that computer science. And then at the elementary, we're starting to introduce, some are more science-based and some are technology-based. It's a little bit, where we kind of wanted to ease them into what really fit with what they were doing, the best ways. And we had trainings for teachers at the elementary this year. And you can see we also had other modules like inputs and outputs, waves and properties of light, the science of light. Those are the ones that we use at the elementary level. We continue to expand, but we've made a lot of progress over the years, because it does, in order to have a Project Lead the Way course, you have to be trained in it. So you can't just pick up a curriculum and go with it. And the training part is sometimes the barrier. The next one is portfolio systems. I know you were here for the Mastery Learning Record presentations that were amazing, of the students who were piloting it at Nipmuc and used it for their college applications with great success based off of their stories. That's not one of our Mastery Learning Records, that's from the Mastery Learning site, but that just kind of gives you a visual of what it can look like. And we've also been piloting through Thrively, which we brought in a couple of years ago, where we did a lot of those reflections for Inspired Learning Day and other reflections in the Thrively platform, which then can connect and have them grow through the competencies through and career, relating it back to career interest and strengths assessment in that platform as well. Last one. I know it's a lot of me talking. Develop district capital and strategic plans to forecast financial implications and increase the district's sense of identity through district branding and building updates. Because a lot of this work is sometimes work that I'm specifically doing. I know I talk about it a lot. What I wanted to do, if you go to the next slide, is highlight a few areas that maybe I hadn't talked about yet or wanted to add to, give you more data. The first one is related to the audit of our digital software programming and trying to come up with a sustainability plan. So that's my first slide. If you go to the next one, go back one. Thank you. So the audit of software tools, were you involved in this with them too, Sam? Yep. And so Sam can talk about this now, but no, just kidding. They used a platform, but feel free to jump in if I get it wrong, but they called Airtable. I know they presented on this last time, so I just gave you a little snapshot. And on the right, we've been highlighted in a few blogs, so I just wanted to give a little excerpt from the Digital Promise website, and I can get you the link. I think the link might be in your tracking document, but that was a highlight of our district. Plus, we were on the Learn Watch website, where they had a 3-blog series about us being part of this partnership. The next phase, now that we have a tool and we have a rubric and we've piloted it, is next year. How do we use it? We'll work with Colleen and see how can we use this to then really analyze all of the tools, because there's a lot, especially coming out of COVID. I mean, some were free, some ended up costing things. We started with some programs, we left some programs, some stayed the whole time. We need to, it went from a small inventory to a big one that we're using. And this is a great way to track it and see what we need, and also link it to our sustainability plan and financial implications with each of, relating to usage of the products and the cost of the products. The next one, I know you know about the press releases, but what I wanted to do is just show you in one full list of the topics that were highlighted this year as a result of our use of our partnership with the public relations, the school public relations group. And here are just a couple of the categories on the right that they highlighted. And what we'll continue to do, they could have written probably more if we were really on top of it, because it should be about, the max they do is about 4 a month. We average maybe, I don't know, not doing the math here, but let's say 2 1 month, 3 another one another month, depending. And that was our first year of organizing. And basically I tried to get input from the leadership team or if an event was coming up. And now that we have a system in place, I think we can probably increase this a lot more next year as well.
Is there kind of a table against each one of these, like where they got picked up?
No. I mean, I guess I could ask them.
I'm curious to see. Because you hit the...
What we noticed with the local paper that we had,
Yeah.
it went from like the Mendon-Upton Daily, I don't know what it's, the Free
Free
Press
Press.
now. Yeah, you'll notice you could go through and track that that's one of the areas that it's sent to. And I think it was you, Sean, who said we're on every page, like one of the months. That was great when we had a lot of examples that we were able to send to them that we didn't really have written up before,
Cool.
because that took time. I mean, we were picked up by, if I was gonna track data, I know you guys like data, we had the one TV spot.
Right.
Love to have more than one positive TV spot get picked up next year. I mean, some of that's not in our control, but the more we do this through them, the more relationships they have, the more we'll create those connections and be able to have expansion as well. We didn't really get picked up much by the Worcester, Metro West, Milford. Like, it didn't seem to show up, even though it was sent to them, but it didn't there. So really I went to a PR training today with the company, and one thing is really, if you can get it to TV, those highlights, that's where it's at for really pushing information. And it's a little bit harder for us, not that it's impossible, because we're not they're always looking for the Boston network area. But if we start to develop that relationship, or they start to come out here, that's gonna help a lot. And also, we get picked up a lot by like blogs. I don't necessarily highlight it. It's almost like we just accept, oh yeah, it's another blog on a site, that wrote about us. But I have great news. Bonnie Nieves is going to be on Chronicle in 2 weeks. We don't know the date. She's a teacher at the high school, and I can't take any credit for it. It's not related to we just found out about it, but someone reached out to her, and we have all of our teachers and administrators have different networks. Liz Garden's presenting all the time. John and Marianne present, it gets picked up, but she also does as well. And it was about AI. She's going to be interviewed about AI in education. So we'll see. It was filmed here.
Yeah.
Chronicle, that's big. I love that.
Absolutely. Be curious to ask them, right?
I can ask them how there are ways that if they track it. I can ask them.
I would guess that they want to, is they want the next contract kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I can track with my newsletter. I know I do try to embed them in my newsletter too. My average for the newsletter is about 1,000 views to 1,500 views every time. That's monthly. Which is, I think, pretty solid, and it's pretty consistent as well. All right, strategic plan. You'll hear a lot about it later, but basically what I wanted to highlight is you'll see the elements listed as new or revised. That's where we spent a lot of our time on the new plan, and we also have, we're adding a few things we didn't have before. We didn't have a vision. Not that we didn't have a vision, but we didn't have a written out vision. We revised the beliefs a little bit. We didn't have values listed, so we have values that we did as the group. We updated our theory of action to a new one. Instead of calling them objectives, they're going to be priorities, because I think that resonates a little bit more with the community, and initiatives as well. And then outcomes, we didn't have outcomes in the last plan. So we have outcomes that are metrics. For those who like metrics, they're not exact. What I have to be honest, so right now they're not exact metrics, because if you're going to say, we want to be at this point, you need to know your starting point. And we don't have in some of those areas, but that would be something we give you a general sense of what we look at. And then when we're in those years that we're focusing on those metrics, that's where we would bring forward some of that initial metric and then specific growth that we're looking for, just so you know. And then we've always had innovative elements, and we'll have those. Some next steps that we'll do in the summer. When we were working on it this past month, with some revisions, we felt like we needed definitions to explain what project-based learning is, or workplace learning, some of the terms that people who aren't in education might not know. And then we'll have a final publishable document in August. I'll talk about that later, with pictures and all these elements, and then we'll roll it out to the school community, because it has to be out to start the year. All right? That'll be breaking news. Oh, that's the end of it. All right. Those are our highlights.
Wow.
Additional questions on that? I tried to keep it at least some high level.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the detailed doc.
Yeah,
It's
it's
right
good.
there.
There's so much in there.
It's right there.
I know.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's some links. I really appreciate the leadership team who has been working on the progress and updates and links and making sure that we don't probably have everything in there, but enough that you'll have a sense of the work that they've been doing.
Good, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
All right, we on some new business? All right.
Jay, do you want to come up for, yeah, just for the iPad and the leaves in case they have questions,
When am I coming up?
just in case they have questions. Plus it's time to stretch. All right, you want me to talk about the iPad, please? Yes.
Let's do it.
All right, we have, and so you can elaborate, but we have a new lease schedule required to order our iPads for the district. And there's one page in that document that needs signatures from the school committee chair and secretary. And that document will authorize Joe Lakey to actually place the order. And we also need to submit the minutes here, which show that you voted to authorize the agreement. That's a requirement for that order to go in. Because there are often supply chain issues, it would be good for us to have that tonight, so we're able to order it, get them in, and get them up and running.
So I'd like to make a motion to vote to approve the next lease cycles for iPads.
Just do a quick discussion.
Oh, okay.
Not-
Well,
not-
no, you're supposed to make a motion and second.
And then
before you
it's-
discuss.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So I'll second the motion.
Okay, now let's discuss.
Now
Now let's
discuss. So, and I apologize if I missed it earlier, what are we doing here?
So we put into the budget a couple $100,000 to start the cycle of having iPads as a recurring cost. So
Right.
this is for, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say it's like 175,000 is what the total cost is over like 4 years, I believe, is what he financed it out. I don't know how many iPads, what I don't know.
I think it says it in the document.
But
And there's two of them that go on 2-year cycles, is that correct?
no, this right now is just for this purchase for this year. Next year, when we do the budget, we need to add another 200,000 to start another cycle so that we have this as a recurring cost. We've never had it in the budget. We've always picked it up through CARES Act money from the towns or, money that we had left here. We've always kind of did onesie-twosie purchases. So this is to build it into the budget. So this is a lease. It's a 4-year lease. It does. I think Joe told me that they, in essence, it's an interest-free loan. What they did is they reduced the price and then put a small interest rate on it because it's a finance company, but Apple did something with it. It also includes Apple Care for the entire 4 years. It also guarantees a minimum of 75 hours when we turn them all back in as a payout back to us. So it's a good lease all the way around. I believe it's Wells Fargo. Is that who this is through?
And we didn't have the Apple Care, just so you know, before.
Okay, I was gonna say, is there a difference in the?
We had
Yeah.
insurance, and now, so you would have to send each one out and then have to pay, and this is, not as much. I think he was explaining.
It's a much better deal all the way
Yeah.
around. We used to try to do 2 years Apple Care, but a lot of times we didn't because they added so much money onto it. This also includes the keyboard attachment, which we haven't always been able to include as part of it, and it's all covered. So it's funny, the price of the iPad when we first started the program, it was around $600 an iPad. It went down all the way as low as about $280 at one point. It's now back closer to the $600. I think it's called pandemic pricing.
And those keyboards, if you recall, or if you don't know, we didn't have the keyboards, but we used those devices for MCAS.
Right.
And we had to have keyboards for all of them, so now when we purchase, we have a keyboard, plus it allows students, just more flexibility with their typing, et cetera, when they're using the class as
Well,
well.
the keyboard is the case as well.
And it's part of the
Right,
case, which has worked really well. So we've learned a lot over the last decade of having iPads and kind of fitting it together with different grants and models, and the leasing has seemed to work with working with Apple as well.
And it fit within the 200K.
Yeah, it's coming in a little bit less than that, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Next year, when we do the same, we'll see what the pricing is then. But I believe if we can get the order in like this week, right now they're telling us we might have them in mid-August, maybe. But we're already pushing it out.
So, I mean, just to be clear, it's a $730,000.
Right.
So it's $170,000, it's like 4 years, it's like it's a NPV, present value use rate, value at the end of it over
Yeah.
with an annual payment of $186,000. So it's 1,200 units. Are we doing are we doing K through 4 or something like that, or?
Do you know we have someone,
I do.
I'm like,
Sam and I.
Joe's on vacation,
Here's what
so
we
I
get to
couldn't
say.
bring up.
Sam
All right,
knows.
sorry.
All right,
It's-
can you tell us?
I'm gonna be the one that's gonna be setting them all up over the summer and mid-August, apparently.
No, late August.
No, it's they're 1,200 to replace the current. They have at the K through 4 level, they have older versions of their iPads, so they were the ones that they went into COVID with. So they're 7th generation iPads. They're kind of more or less at the end of their cycle, at like end of life kind of deal. So we're replacing all of those. Plus, it helps start that when Jay was talking about that 4-year cycle of them getting new devices at the start of every new school, essentially. So they get it, I think, in K, and it lasts them through 4. And then they get one in 5th grade, lasting them through 8th. And then they get a new one in 9th and lasting them through 12. So it takes a while for them to get to that point. But the K through 4 was part of the.
I think that's the ones we bought with the CARES Act money.
Yeah, it was the CARES Act. Yeah. So they had those through COVID. So they're mostly 3-year-old. Yeah, they're in desperate.
And we will be selling them to Second Life Mac, I think is who we use, and we expect to get between 50 and 75 an iPad when we turn them in, which will go into an account to cover any other residual costs that come up.
All right, okay.
So the iPads that we're getting, are they the latest, greatest iPads? Are they Gen -1?
Yeah. I think Joe was talking about that they're 10th gens. So they're the brand new ones, like right there. They just were factory made this year. So we don't usually, with Apple, they don't do, like the latest one based on these lease agreements because they want it to last all 4 years. And they are the same consumer ones that you can buy. So they're not an education version. It's the full 10th generation iPad.
So this to me was unexpected. Is there something you're seeing that is unexpected?
No, I knew we talked about the $200,000 number. I guess I was a little. I was thinking more was a total 200,000. Just the 760 surprised me a little bit.
No, that was why it was such. That was honestly that's why it was such a. We had to be careful over what we were talking about there because it was
Right.
committing to the 2 cycles.
Right.
The 2.
Yeah,
Two
we've never
4-year
had
cycles.
any of this in the budget.
Correct. Well, and we might be committing
Yeah.
to 3 cycles
Why
at some
3?
point. Well, because this is good for 4 years.
Well, we're doing 1,200 now, we'll do 1,200 again, that's
Yes.
2,400, that's approximately how many we
That's
need.
2 overlapping
Got it.
cycles.
Okay.
It's gonna be more than just like 1 through 4, it's not gonna be more than 4 grades, I think, I wanna say maybe 9th graders. I forget what it was, I think 9th graders are keeping theirs,
I got it.
they have it in their heads where they're going,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
this is basically half.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
The only problem is most of the signatures refer to Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1 has a typo. That it's only calling for a quantity of 1,200 units, so it's 1,200 units.
It doesn't.
But it's in
Assuming-
packs of
assuming-
100, right?
It's 120.
It
But
says
it's in
100.
packs.
10 packs. You
Yeah,
got it.
10
Yeah,
packs.
120
Yeah.
10.
Okay.
Okay.
I read it down.
Look at you. All right.
Okay. All right, so we're good.
We better
We're
sign
not
it.
buying 120, we're buying.
Yeah, it's 120
All right,
10 packs.
Eric.
Because that would be a lot of
Was
money.
that-
Wait till vote.
Yeah, right. All right, sounds good. Before we sign this, let's move on with the vote.
Okay, sounds
All in favor?
good. All right.
All right.
Did you say you needed roll call for this, or you're good with just the voice vote?
I don't think you need a
Yeah.
roll call.
Okay.
They just wanna know that you
Something.
are aware of it,
And
voted
then
it, and
it-
approved it.
In the minutes,
and then
and
it's-
if we could get those sooner, so that way we can, I
I'm
think
not
we have
the-
to,
am I
we're
the secretary?
required
Who
to
is the
send it.
secretary?
The secretary is, I think it's
No, I
Jim,
think it's
That's
So
okay.
there we go.
Okay,
it's always the new guy.
good.
Sorry to make that more painful.
All right.
No, that wasn't painful, you did the right thing.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, up next, the graduation day?
We had, for the next one, yeah, don't go anywhere. We had to sign our contract for graduation for the Hanover Theater for next year. And it's a hot item that weekend, and let's see, BBT will be on Thursday. Apparently I'll be at that, my son will be graduating. And Grafton's on Friday in there, and Nipmuc will be there on Saturday. So we tried to get the Friday, but got beat out by like a day by Grafton. So that will likely be the battle over the year, the battle of the couple towns over the years, for which date you can kind of get in there, but it was an exceptional event.
Freaking Grafton.
Yeah, I know.
Is there a
We
significant-
beat them out this year. We got it in. They're like, what do you mean we're not there on Friday? Well, we are, but.
Is there a
Some of the
significant
parents
cost
with
difference
senior
between-
athletes will appreciate that.
Okay.
Because if the
Was there a
graduation is on a
conflict?
Saturday, then it allows the parents to put in a request to shift tournament times
Oh,
if it
that's
conflicts.
absolutely right.
So
okay.
I
there
should
will
be,
be,
I should be
good.
thinking about this.
Yeah.
That's good.
so that was some of the feedback I got from the Friday night is it was the senior softball players
Absolutely.
who were going to run into difficulties with
Okay.
scheduling because they
When
don't,
it was.
right, and they wouldn't hear the request to shift times because the
For any other
graduation is on a
reason.
Friday, not on a weekend.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
this should be, that should actually be helpful to
Excellent.
senior athlete families.
Perfect. I'd love to
And
hear it.
Is there a significant cost difference between the Friday and Saturday?
No,
Oh,
no,
right.
it's just the date. And every once in a while, I remember in my previous district when we were there, every once in a while, some musical comes through and you get totally bumped out a
Yeah.
night, and they take precedence because they make a lot of money on those. But it hadn't happened for a number of years. So I think it should be relatively consistent with what we want. And if not, we'll figure out other situations. But it was great this year. Because it's the school calendar, it's on it, kind of a significant date on it. I know people want to know already for next year when it's going to be. We just need a motion and vote to approve that date on that calendar, and we'll update it.
Motion to vote and approve the graduation date of June 1st in the next year's calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, 4-0.
The next one, Jay has been on point for this one the whole year. We have one of the elementary school lease agreements for you to review, and if you feel comfortable with it, to vote to approve it. And then I guess we would have to sign. Is there a
So,
signature?
Yeah, I think
we'll send
Eric
it
has
them.
to sign
All
it.
right. Basically, we discovered that about a year ago, if not everyone knows, that we didn't have, our leases had run out they were 20-year leases, and they ran out for Memorial and Clough. And basically, we took that old one, which was in kind of typewriter time, and we had it typed up. It was, and it's it was literally in typewriter.
Wait, that was only 20 years ago.
I know.
Let's not.
I swear. And so we made it look a little bit more modern and had it typed up and then sent it off to our attorneys, the town, their attorneys. And it honestly, even though Jay's been putting forth excellent effort in reaching back out to the towns, it has been in the town's hands and legal hands for much of the year, and we've checked back in, and then there might be some back and forth or questions, and then it'll be another month go by. So we have one for you tonight, and this one is for Mendon. For class.
Did you get the roof negotiated into?
Roof, a car,
Yeah, right.
country music, anything you want.
There was an insurance issue going on, is that all resolved?
Basically, the town is adhering to what they have in the lease. It's kind of ambiguous how it's phrased. It only has to do with what they term partial or total destruction of the building. I asked them to define that, and it's not really defined. Quite honestly, I think we're gonna continue to handle things the way we always have, which when we have some kind of damage that's an insurance claim, we deal with it and we get the insurance proceeds and we fix it. We had a claim at Nipmuc recently, or we have one going on right now, but we own Nipmuc. But we've had a few at Clough. The insurance company is fine. So I'm not really that concerned about it. And I did talk to our lawyers, and he basically said, look, don't die on the sword over this.
Yeah.
was more about the clarity of it, just making sure. But the way I interpreted the language and what they responded with was, it seemed like external events, tornado, major flood, but we haven't had floods, but, or something, the tree comes down, hopefully a tree won't come down and take out a school, but like, it would be
Wrong
something that
school.
took out a section of a school. So it was because they said, well, we own that building, that would be our insurance for the
Is it
building.
the policies?
But most of the maintenance work is
Yes.
ours, and we manage all of that. So in most cases, we're managing, but that's where we kind of had a lack of clarity or tried to get clarity, but we're comfortable with how it's written.
Motion to approve the 20-year lease for Clough.
So moved, Greg. So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, it's approved, and I will sign.
You have that to sign too?
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
then we'll get it back to them. Probably bring you the memorial one in August, I hope.
All right, so let's talk about district plans again. The district strategic plan draft for 2023 through 2028.
All
Dr.
right.
Cohen.
Next presentation, Sam. I presented with you the working draft. It doesn't look too pretty, lots of grids, lots of information. So you have that document. What I'm going to do is just visually kind of break down each of the sections. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the details, but if you have a question, you can ask me about it or ask later on as well. So feel free. I don't want to keep us here all night on it. But what I would like to begin with is just giving you, I didn't create a slide for it, but you can leave it on this one. We started in January. We met monthly. I'm really appreciative of Vicki and Sean, who are members from the school committee, who were at all those meetings, 2 hours for each of the meetings. And we also, you can see, you have the strategic planning committee and all of the representatives that were on the committee and the numerous stakeholders that were part of that. And just as a reminder too, I had 10 focus groups, some with a fair amount of people, some with a couple people, but we certainly provided a lot of opportunities for people to give feedback. And we also had a survey that went out to the community. We had feedback, and we brought in previous survey data into our work for additional feedback of what the community was looking for. And that really drove what we did at the meetings. And I don't know, well, Sean, you're the only representative here at the table, but at times it's kind of rigorous. Like, it's a lot of activities to go through and analyze data, come back, come to themes, look at the themes, come back, work on beliefs. Let's take a look. Do we agree with that? Let's, combine them. It's a lot of conversations, a lot of feedback. It takes 6 months, 7 months. At the end, we took all of what we had and I drafted it up. Again, leadership team dove in, refined some of the elements. Then we had another meeting with the leadership team, refined after I worked on it in between elements. And then after that, the last meeting was June 5th, did some more on June 12th, and then a little bit more in the last couple of days because I'd find, a word or error or something, something missing. It's gone through numerous iterations, and I do imagine there are a few minor details in it that we will, as we create the publishable document, that would be just minor tweaks, but not like the substance of it is going to remain what you see tonight. So those were images. It's all right. You can go back. No, you're good. We had lots of images and work and a lot of group work at the meetings.
There's a lot of thanks go out to the community members
Yeah.
and the students.
Yeah.
Because that was very
They were
valuable.
great.
They were
That
excellent.
was huge. I agree. Thank you. All right, we'll start with our working vision right now. Vision 2028. A lot of the work we do in the beginning, and then we come back to it at the end, is what is our vision? What do we want to see happening in our schools as an outcome? And it's supposed to be aspirational. Something we're aspiring to meet is this vision. And where we want to be, a thriving community of inspired learners who cultivate their fullest potential, create their own future, and contribute positively to an ever-changing world. There may be some verbiage adjustments. We've gone through about 4 iterations of this right now, but this is pretty close. We wanted to get at the essence of, and we speak a lot about learners as opposed to students, because there was a lot of feedback of including all members of the Mendon-Upton community, including staff and including teachers as well. So we tend to reference and try to get it for learners where areas that could apply. I'm gonna just keep going, but feel free to stop me at any point. So our mission, you know our mission. So our mission is what we do to bring our vision to life, and that remains the same: to empower all learners to thrive. So if you make those connections, if we did in fact empower all learners to thrive, and if you went back to the vision, you would see that that was what's taking place in our vision in 5 years. We made a few updates to our beliefs, and just to understand how this was framed when we did it 5 years ago, we didn't have beliefs before in our strategic plans, and we talked a lot about what the learning environment should look like and what our beliefs about learning would be. So if we believe all learners thrive when these things are happening, then that's kind of what you're going to be seeing happening in the classrooms. And I would say we've seen a lot of growth in these areas, and we added one in that we didn't have before, and we changed a few of the words to make it a little bit more updated. So we have active, meaningful, authentic experiences. You hear a lot about that already, right? Portrait of a learner connections and workplace learning and project-based learning. Learning experiences that honor their identities, interests, strengths, and goals. We made a couple of changes in there, but we're always trying to begin with our students' strengths and interests and passions, and also added in the goal setting and their identities. We established a culture of inquiry, exploration, reflection, and growth. That's a new belief. We didn't have that before, and we had a lot of conversations around what type of environment creates innovation and encourages people to take risk. And some of the terms that we have in there were what we talked about. A safe, supportive, inclusive environment exists where each learner feels known, valued, and celebrated. We've had that language that has come from our EDI vision, our equity, diversity, inclusion vision that we came up with a couple years ago about really knowing, valuing, celebrating, and challenging our students. And students, families, educators, and large community collaborators, partners in learning. That we might have changed it slightly, but that's essentially the same about partnerships. What's new is the next one. A lot of plans will have values that you refer to. This is one of the last things we did as an activity where, as a group, we brainstormed. If we looked at what we already had for our strategic priorities and our initiatives and our vision and beliefs, then what do we view as our values that are showing up that we talk about? And these were the top values. We had lists, I think it was one of the posters that were linked in there. And these were the top ones. So authentic learning, we talked a lot about that. Student agency, what's new for us, we didn't reference this at all in our, other than inclusion, we didn't talk about equity, diversity, or belonging 5 years ago. And that's a big part of what we talk about now. The whole child, and that really leads to kind of our MTSS systems, but it resonates a little bit more with people that we are trying to meet the needs of all aspects of our children's experiences, collaboration, and community. And those were the top ones that came about. Theory of action. This is brand new. I think it's a little bit more specific than the one that we had last time. The one we had last time was fine. It was about bringing our portrait of a learner to life, which I think we've done in many ways. But if we create a collaborative school culture, well, get a typo there, collaborative school culture, where we know, thank you, Cheryl, value, support, and empower each learner while providing engaging, meaningful, and authentic learning experiences, then we not only will unleash the potential of each learner, we will enable them to be ready for anything. We always try to have a balance with the personal learning experiences of our students, but also not just be that. We really want them to be ready for whatever the world is they're going to face in the world. We want them to contribute to the world. And we had a lot of language about the individual learners, and what we worked in some of this process is to make sure that we're talking about the outward experiences and what they're going to be heading towards as well. Strategic priorities. This is too small for me. All right, I've been looking at these for a while too. So we have 4 categories for strategic priorities. And if you recall, I just went over 4 like strategic objectives that we kind of wrapped up or connected to at the end of the year. You'll see that some of these are kind of new iterations or similar or more up to date. But you're not seeing necessarily a huge straying away from what our core aspects of a school system are. Deeper learning. Our number one priority to provide opportunities where every student will experience relevant, future-ready, and personally meaningful learning that will help them develop and reflect on their portrait of a learner competencies. And you'll see how this is broken down through the initiatives after. High-quality curriculum and instruction to develop and implement collaborative structures that enable data-informed decisions, vertically aligned curriculum, and high-quality instruction for each learner. We were just talking about some of that work with data recently. Equity, inclusion, and well-being. Expand programs and practices to ensure each member of the school community is known, valued, celebrated, and supported. And community support. Develop systems for equitable and sustainable resources and community partnerships to support student learning. Hopefully those resonate with all of you. What I did is just in this chart, I kind of broke it down. Basically, you normally want to have like 5 or 6 initiatives that are under each strategic priority. We have 7, because a couple I just couldn't leave out, but we have 7 for each of them. And one thing you have to keep in mind, these initiatives go across the 5 years, right? So some you may tackle kind of all and focus on 1 year, and some may take a couple years, and you'll see kind of connections back to it. And just know that you can't succeed in a lot of these just in 1 year. It's something that's going to drive our work. And that's where you'll see the action steps and the outcomes that we have each of the years as we try to meet these initiatives. So for the deeper learning, you have continued project-based learning, inquiry-oriented learning. You have the varied methods of performance assessments, showcases of learning, and end-of-year capstones. We're going to keep expanding that. You have developing professional learning partnerships that bring in community and business partners into our learning. 1.4 is related to creating more flexibility in our school schedules to open up new opportunities for learning. I know that's really broad as a statement, but if you think about it, sometimes we're finding we keep getting constrained by technical schedules, bells, contracts, DESI rules, and we have to keep thinking creatively about how we can still deliver what we need and not be limited by some of these constraints. And one happens to is often schedule in different ways we can do things. So that's come up a lot. Next one is 1.5 is work-based learning experiences, job shadowing, internships, career-based education. So that could be ending with internships in your junior, senior year. It could be job shadowing as a sophomore. It could be career, going to learn about careers in general in middle school and discovering your interests in elementary. That's how you would see the path of going. Next one is establish partnerships with colleges and universities to create new opportunities for students. Some things could be early college credit, learning about college and career opportunities, and maximizing higher ed resources for learning. This is an opportunity that we haven't quite, there's a lot of room for growth there. And the last one is create alternative metrics for achievement, such as personal narratives, reflection portfolios that illustrate the diverse skills, interests, accomplishments, and growth of our learners. You've seen some of the pilot and portfolio work that we've done. We want to continue that and grow that work, so that remains in here. That was in the last plan as well, written slightly differently. Before I move on, questions on deeper learning? If not, I'll keep going. Number 2, high quality curriculum instruction. Identify quantitative metrics for student learning that will enable progress monitoring and consistent feedback. 2, it talks about horizontal, vertical curriculum articulation and alignment to make sure our student knowledge is building. And that's, you're always gonna have that. That is the core of the work. But we're making a lot of progress there. Common assessments for supporting inquiry, progress monitoring, and collaboration. We have some of the benchmark assessments, but in some grade levels, we don't have common assessments where we can even get better at analyzing the data. Next one, shifting practices in grading and feedback to better reflect learning and growth, promote equity, and foster performance-based and competency-based learning. That's looking at ways to shift away from the average of a grade, which is how we do it right now, and actually get to more competency-based, here are the standards, and really seeing like, did they learn it, or did they just not do a homework assignment? Really getting at learning, which is really, really intricate work. It takes years to move that. But another piece of that, if you notice, it talks about feedback, because we all know, right? If we get feedback and we reflect on it, that's how our brains change, and that's how we get better and grow. So if our students in areas aren't getting that critical feedback and having an opportunity to reflect, which is a key component of project-based learning, as an example, it's one of the gold standards that we have in that. That's the core of us, all of our students really being those lifelong learners. And we want to really emphasize that and work on it. But that takes a lot of training in order to give that feedback. Next one is you've heard a lot about already, increasing instructional coaching to support high quality instruction. And some of that could be an instructional coach, which we've added in the budget like a year or so ago. But it also could be our own teachers coaching other teachers in that model as well. Incorporate and support the use of data inquiry cycles. You know all about that now, you're experts. And then conduct program and curricular reviews to ensure coherent pathways for learning opportunities including tech, business, art, music, wellness, library, or languages. I try to think of any of those various specials, but I want us to be, and maybe this will be one that I'll slightly change the words later so it's clear. But what I want us to do is, let's talk AI. Where does AI fit into the math frameworks? And it's not in there, but certainly we need to be teaching students and engaging in, multiple different types of programs. And so what I want us to do is to review, stick with whatever's happening in our world and try to predict what our students will need as best as we can, because it changes so quickly. And that's what that's about, to make sure that all aspects of our education, not just ELA, math, science, and social studies, are reviewed and are changing and are adapting, because we're always doing it in our core subjects. Strategic priority number 3, equity, diversity, inclusion, well-being. We're going to maintain our focus on this and build culturally inclusive learning environments. We're just beginning here, to be honest. There's tons of work that we can do in this area. And if the 3.1 through 3.7, we had people prioritize at strategic planning what they thought were the priorities, and that was the top priority for the groups in this category. Next one is to continue to design approaches where learners can identify their strengths, interests, etc. This still continues. This was in the last one, more work on SEL pre-K to 12. We're just not where we need to be on it being systemic. We have lots of great training embedded in areas, but it's not coherent yet, pre-K to 12. Increase access for all learners to mental health resources and supportive programming. So this is a great example. Originally, this was written as increase access for students, but really everyone needs to increase access for these supports, and that was something that we changed. 3.5 relates to MTSS. 3.6 is what we talked about with student voice, but not just student voice, also parents and community members, and increasing input into decision making and ideas, especially as we get to talking about building needs, budget needs. The more we engage, we know the better we'll be in a better place. And the last one's related to our student support services and making sure that we have regular reviews of different programs happening in student support, as well as writing of IEPs, related service providers. We've had some where we just want to make sure that's in there. And finally, community support, number 4. Some of this is pretty obvious, but we're always looking to improve communication at all levels. Number 2, I'd like to see more family volunteers and community members in our schools as every day as part of our practice. It's been hard with COVID, but we're working that way, but there's a lot more resources that we can bring in. Number 3 relates to capital planning. Number 4 relates to recruitment, hiring, retention of high quality and diverse educators. Group 5, I just noticed a typo, I gotta fix that. Continuing the branding and messaging to highlight successes through multiple communication channels. Earlier tonight, we were saying we don't use video yet. that's the next area. We don't use podcasting. There are other areas that we can communicate that and reach people. So we're always going to be looking to improve. And then collaborate with community leaders regarding financial and facility needs of the district. And the last one, partner with safety officials to ensure safety, security, and crisis protocols. We've been updating our crisis protocols. We've had some reviews just at the end of this year of our school security. That's going to be work that's ongoing and always looking to improve. So those are the 4. I'm going to pause.
Makes sense. We're good?
Good? Now, I'm not going to list and read off this. I'm just going to show you. You can look at it after. What we did is just identify some of the professional learning that would support those categories. In some way, this is almost a good way for you to start looking at the initiatives because it's just shorter, it's just easier to see. I'm going to go to the next one. This is, I think, what you guys get excited about. We have some of the deeper learning outcomes. We broke it up into more kind of the metrics, kind of more the quantitative numbers and growth list there. And then what we want to also talk about is more the stories and, you know, some of the outputs of and outcomes of commitments to the community, either like here are early indicators that you would see that we're progressing towards it, or you would hear, like I said, I'd hear more people talking, right, about and using data and not questioning and everyone's just using it. That is more of those commitments to the community, but the more quantitative ones and metrics are at the top of each of these. I'm not going to go through all of them because I think that would be a little bit too much for us. But you can see you have access to it. Well, if the community wants to hear more about them later, we can, you know, post this and put that up so people can see where we're at. But you have the 1, 2, 3, 4, the various metrics and aspects. And then at the end of this, just to remind you, keep going. You have innovative elements, which are, I put at the base of that triangle. Like this is part of our culture, where student agency is something we talk about. Technology that amplifies learning, authentic work that matters. This is language that we use, flexible learning environments. And this is a focus. If we use all of these innovative elements, it helps to open up the doors to the work and the rest of the plan. If you go to my cute pictures on the next page, so we have, I had to show you these pictures of, this is from Inspired Learning Day, the design challenge and the portrait of a learner, and just to see how it's brought to life. And then on the next 2 pages here, you have our portrait of a learner, which we've shared with you that they use for the learning record. And that's taken years for us to develop to that point as well. And then final slide. Different aspects of the whole child and what's going on in our district.
So there's an immense amount of work that you put into this to consolidate all the data that we have, just to let everybody know.
Yeah.
There's a big giant step between what we came up with in the last meeting, which was to consolidate the different lists together. And then you went through the work of coming up with the rubric for how it would be accomplished and which level, 1 through 7, that would be accomplished. So my compliments on that work. That's an amazing amount of work with you and your staff and whatever.
Yeah.
And
many iterations.
Yeah.
You know,
But I just have to say, what I love about this plan is that it gives a lot more information about how we're going to execute it.
Right.
And that is something that we had no guidance on after the last strategic plan.
And I think that will help us too. What was really interesting when we had new staff come on board, it'd be interesting to ask you, but I remember this last year too, they're like, what do you mean by this?
Yeah.
You know, because it just, we knew those that were here, like, oh yeah, not this is what we talked about. But I do feel that it's clearer. I mean, it's important to have clarity around it.
There was a big disconnect even with the community when we were trying to say these things. It turned out to be like education buzzwords that had no real meaning, you know, at the ground level. What does that mean?
And I think that's what we needed, even though it might have been as clear for everyone, what we needed at that time, we needed a spark to really think about, and we talked a lot about redesigning and reimagining what schools look like. And as a result of that really aspirational thinking, we have all of the amazing presentations that you get all the time. right? That's going on that you, at the time, you weren't seeing a lot of that in schools. And so now we want to continue that and bring it to the next level, but also fundamentally improve some of our systems that, support the work as well. I know it's a lot of Maureen in front of you speaking. I will try not to have the both of the same, or we won't have a new one for 5 years, so that'll be good. That'll be good, but I'm really appreciative of the leadership team and the strategic planning, committee and everyone who gave feedback. And I will say, I went back to our initial 100, we had more than 100 initiatives that were brought forward. We grouped them together, they had them out on a table and put them into categories. We had themes, then we came back, looked at other feedback, and we got where we needed to be, where we're incorporating most of it, where you may not hear, there may be a buzzword or something someone really wanted, I want this, but there's an element for whatever that this is within the plan, as best as we were able to accommodate.
This is kind of related, but for the facilities eval that we had,
Yep.
can we get that spreadsheet in a form that we can manipulate? We'll probably want it for capital planning. So we got the presentation,
Yeah.
but in an Excel or something that we can actually manipulate.
What format do we,
If we got it in a PDF.
just in that
so
We don't
PDF?
have it like that.
I can ask them if they can, you're talking about the tables.
Yeah, with all of the different schools and all of the different, so we can,
Yeah,
organize and.
I can ask them if they have that in a spreadsheet fashion, or I'm wondering if we can just pull it out of the PDF, save it, export it into Excel,
Yeah,
which I can try and play with.
And we have a draft, Jay and Ken put together a draft capital list before that facility assessment. And we can use that too, because that's something you can manipulate, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could
and
try
add
to
some of our
add that
work
stuff
as
to
well
it.
for as we create it. Yeah.
All right, so I think regarding the strategic plan, we've got a couple options as a committee tonight. I think we can, you guys can help guide me here. We can vote to accept the strategic plan, or we can vote to take it, kind of like we do policy, sometimes take it as a first read, and then, hit this upon our first meeting back in August, and we need to go through as much detail, but at that point, if people want to read the presentation and the other background materials, so we can open up for discussion
I mean, I'm sort of,
or motions.
I've been exposed to it a lot, so that it's really, I'll take myself out of that vote, I can recuse myself there. Not that I won't vote on whatever you but I feel like we should approve it. I feel like I would approve it, but I completely understand that people need to read more.
I felt like it was very well done, very thorough. In its current condition.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the district strategic plan draft for 2023 through 2028?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There we go.
Thank
All right.
Nice.
And we will bring forward the fancy pretty booklet before the start of the school year.
Sounds good. All right, school committee subcommittees, I don't think any of them have met since we were all together last 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we will start those up again in August, the next school year. Are there any other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? I don't have any. Anybody else? No. All right, we don't have any correspondence at this time. Since today is the last meeting, we don't have any future agenda items for this year. We'll start fresh in August. So with that, we're gonna move to executive session. So we're gonna do a motion and a roll call vote needed. Enter executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, exception number 2, to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel. We will return to general session only for the purpose of adjournment.
So,
Can we get a motion to move to executive session?
So moved. Roll call vote, right?
And second.
Second, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're really off.
That's okay.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
Jim Forkey, aye.
All right, and with that, we are now in executive session. We're entering